Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Abitchonistim. It's a great pleasure to be joined today by Brigadier General Amir Avivi, the founder and chairman of IDSF. General, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
General, you had a very important meeting today. Let's start with that. What can you share with us?
Yes, thank you, Moshe. Today, indeed, we had a very important meeting. We met with the Prime Minister, Netanyahu. I think it's our maybe ninth meeting since the beginning of the war. And I think this meeting comes in a very, very defining moment in this war, where we understand that we are, on one hand, on the verge of decisive victory, on the other hand, in a danger of a devastating defeat. And this is something that completely depends on Rafah. We talked about it a lot. Rafah is the key for destroying Hamas as a governmental and military entity, for bringing back our hostages. It's the key to destroy all the battalion of Hamas, and it's also the key to close the Egyptian border and prevent any buildup of future capabilities inside Gaza. Everything depends on Rafah. And I think that when we face a reality where the administration, and now the president itself with his own voice, says we are threatening Israel not to send aid, weapons, munitions, if Israel goes into Rafah. Basically, the administration is putting Israel in a real existential threat. I think this is unprecedented in history, that the American administration actually endangers existentially the state of Israel. I don't know really how much they understand the repercussions of what they're doing. Why is this an existential threat? Because it's obvious that if we don't go into Rafah, this means Hamas will be able to build themselves from scratch. We assess that in 3, 4, 5 months, Hamas will be able to rebuild itself completely. They have a potential of 100,000 militants that can be equipped. Iran is planning to send them huge amount of capabilities to build up back their forces. In a few months, we can find ourselves in a reality where Hamas goes back to the same power it had on the 6th of October. And it means that everything we did, all this war, all this sacrifice, all these soldiers that died, will be for nothing. And this will be devastating. It will be devastating for the morale and of Israel and the Jewish people. It can be a terrible defeat. Of course, it will be devastating because we put huge effort economically, munitions, everything we had in defeating Hamas in order to get a reality where they will build themselves very fast back. And then we'll be in a problem of weapons and munitions and so on. It will be devastating because the message to Iran, to Lebanon, to the militias in Syria, in Iraq, Houthis, is that America has left Israel, is not supporting Israel, right to defend itself, and they can attack us. It can bring also an intifada in Judea and Samaria. It can wake up Israeli Arabs. It can be a whole hurricane. And what I'm describing here is not something that is far-fetched. This is reality. Everything I'm saying is something that actually might happen. So when we talked to the Prime Minister, it was very, very clear that Israel cannot accept these threats. Israel has to go into Rafah and destroy Hamas and bring the hostages and close the border and destroy all the army of Hamas inside Rafah. Now the question was, how do we do it? How fast? How much time? In what ways? I won't get into the discussion we had, but I must say that one of the biggest challenges the Prime Minister has, it's not just that the fact that he has to stand strong and say to the US administration, we're not going to lose this war, we're going into Rafah, whatever are the consequences. The problem is that we have politicians also in the cabinet who tend to think that we are the 51st star in the American flag and forget that we are a sovereign country that has its own interest. And therefore, they have a huge difficulty to do something against the administration's will. And this, I would say, psychological difficulty is endangering Israel a lot. If we would have seen all our cabinets united, saying crystal clear to the administration, we are not going to lose, we are going to Rafah, the probability is that the administration would have stepped back and said, okay, we understand that Israelis are all aligned, and therefore we are not really going the right direction. But when some of our politicians actually embrace what the administration is saying, this is terrible. And the administration, at the end of the day, the interest is very simple. They want to win elections. They think that the way to win elections, I'm not sure they're right. I think personally that they are wrong in their assessment, but they think that the way to win elections is quiet everything, stop the war, get a long ceasefire, not going to Rafah, do a ceasefire with Hamas, and then do a ceasefire with Hezbollah, and then do a peace agreement with Saudi Arabia, and sounds like kumbaya, great, everybody will be in peace. But it's not really the reality. The reality is that if we do a ceasefire, this will give Hamas a chance to build a huge army. Then everything we did was for nothing, and this doesn't make sense. And also, what do we do with the 80,000 Israeli displaced citizens in the north if Hezbollah maybe stops shooting, but they are still in South Lebanon, they're not going anywhere? And why would they? If they think that Israel is not enjoying anymore the US support. And also, what are Ukrainians thinking, Saudis thinking, Taiwan thinking when they see the administration behaving like that to its closest ally, willing to sacrifice us for elections? I think that in this case, seriously, I'm never, ever involved in American politics. But I think that every single Jew in the US must stand and say, this is a red line. You don't threat Israel with not sending munitions in the middle of an existential war. You don't tell Israel how to manage the war when this is our war. It's our lives at stake. And I think that if the administration won't hear all of the Jews uniting, as we should in Israel as well, and sending a clear message that this is a red line, And unfortunately, we might see these policies continuing. Now, I personally think that if Israel does the right thing, say to the world and to the administration, no, we are defending ourselves when we are going to Rafah. When we'll go and win the war, the pressure will go down, it won't go up. Now the pressure is at its peak, and the more we seem to be like afraid to do something because of the pressure will just mount more and more. The way to break it, it really do what Israel needs to do, go into Rafah and win this war. And of course, after Rafah, concentrate on the north, do what's needed to do to secure our border. We have only one choice, win decisively. There is no other choice for Israel. We have to win decisively. I don't think we had such a defining moment, maybe for thousands of years. And I think that if every Jew and every Israeli would understand how critical this moment is, millions will go out and shout, we want victory. We're not going to give up. We're not in the Holocaust now. We have a state. We have a strong army. The soldiers on the ground, the commanders are all ready. They demand that they are sent to win the war. They want to win, and we can do it. The army is ready for that. And so this is what we are facing. And I think that in this sense, when we come as generals that are strong-minded, that want victory, that show strength when we're not afraid, even if there is pressure, international pressure, this empowers the Prime Minister a lot. This is the kind of people and the kind of voice the Prime Minister needs at this very, very difficult moment in order to take the right decisions. 4 years ago, this voice didn't exist. Now it's strong and loud, and it's heard throughout all media in Israel and outside. And in conventions, this week we participated in Yediot Achronot convention. It's the biggest paper in Israel. 2 weeks ago in Israel Hayom. Soon enough, we are coming to New York and participating in the Jerusalem Post Convention and the Beersheba Convention, and we are doing a gala together with the Jerusalem Post, and we're going to be honored in both events. And again, this voice is heard everywhere, and we're going to launch in the coming days a big campaign in Israel, really calling for unity and victory and not giving up our right to defend ourselves by ourselves. Moshe.
General, thank you for sharing all of that and for doing everything you are doing to fight for the state of Israel and expressing these very critical messages to the Prime Minister. It is just so important. Thank you, of course, to all of our viewers and supporters who have sent in questions. We can't always get to every question, but they're always appreciated and help us direct these conversations and these briefings. General, the number one question that people have been sending in, and I can't even count how many messages we got, is a better understanding of the impact of the withheld munitions by the U.S. What practically, operationally does that mean in Gaza, in Lebanon, in terms of moving forward in this war, to the extent that you can share?
Yes, I think that one of the biggest challenges in a very, very long war as we are experiencing, obviously, is the amount of munitions. Unfortunately, Israel didn't prepare properly for this challenge. The stockpiles we had were not enough, and also the production capability of our industries was not built to support such a long war. And unfortunately, I'm saying we became very dependent in this war in the flow of munitions from the US, and the US knows that. And this is why they can use it as a leverage against us. At the moment, Israel has all the munition it needs to destroy Hamas in Gaza. We have the munitions we need for a war in Lebanon. But again, this is always a challenge. We need those munitions. Without them, it will affect how strongly we can operate, especially in the north, and also getting ready for a possible challenge with Iran. So basically, what the administration is doing now, it's playing with our lives. And why? For elections. And I'm saying anybody in the States who endangers Israel is not going to be elected. They need to understand that at the end of the day, the vast majority of Americans are fully supportive of Israel. These loud noises that try to tell lies about us, they are a small minority, doesn't represent the vast majority of Americans. I think this is a message of weakness. This is not the way to treat allies, and especially not the state of Israel, that is the biggest and closest and most meaningful ally for the US. And we have to know to thank for everything that we did get help, but we're also a country that wants to be safe. We need to do the right thing to ensure that we are victorious and safe.
Aside from the US, are there other countries that Israel can enter into an agreement with to gain access to munitions?
It's very, very complicated. Today, we're very much dependent mostly on the US. We have different agreements with other countries, but definitely in the short term, this affects us a lot.
Now, the IDF spokesperson downplayed the significance of the withholding of these arms shipments and spoke about operational support by the US is more important than providing these supplies. I'm wondering if you can comment on that idea.
Operational support is mostly has to do with the way the US is handling shooting from Yemen, from the Houthis, and intelligence that we get through some capabilities and other things. It's true that the issue of munitions is not extremely urgent, but if it continues like a month or two, and the administration gets tougher on these issues, then of course it will impact Israel, and it will be a huge problem. And I think that if this continues, Israel will have to reconsider all the relations and how much we can rely on the US. I think that anyway, looking at what's happening now, the need for Israel to be able to defend itself by really relying on our own industries and our own capabilities, it's something that is very, very evident. And the ability of the industries is growing by the day. But again, this is a long process. We're not going to be able to bridge everything we need in the war itself.
Now, do you think that the administration believes that Israel can beat Hamas without a full operation in Rafah, or do they not care if Israel can beat Hamas?
I think that they're looking at November. What happens after November, doesn't really matter. It's all about the elections. But for us, this is devastating. We cannot wait for November. We have to deal with Hamas now. And this is why our interests are not aligned, and it's okay. They're not supposed to be always aligned.
There are continued efforts by U.S. officials to broker a deal with Hamas for a ceasefire. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that the administration's policy has endangered our hostages a lot, because if the administration would have said to Hamas, we will do everything for Israel to destroy you, we will assist Israel, we'll give munitions, we'll give them a green light, Hamas needs to be destroyed, then Hamas would be under pressure, military pressure, international pressure, and then they would have been much more motivated to do a hostage deal under fire and being in an existential threat. But when the US says we are not going to support Israel if they go to Rafah, why on earth would Hamas give us hostages? What is the pressure? Without pressure, we are pressured, not them. Without pressure, what motivation do they have to release hostages? What's the need? They're saying, okay, Israelis are not going in. Why do we have to give them anything? I mean, Sinwar is a sadist. He wants Israel to suffer. He wants the families to suffer. And we have to remember another thing. Hamas understands perfectly well that they cannot win against Israel in the battlefield. They have a strategy composed of two elements. One, international pressure, and this is working very well for them. America is playing exactly the game Hamas wants. They want pressure on Israel. And the other thing is inside pressure inside Israel to bring down the government. They know that if the government falls, Israel will lose the war. If we go to elections, Israel will not continue the war. Now let's think about it. How do you get Israel to go to elections? You do it, and this is exactly what they're doing, by creating more and more pressure from the families of the hostages that are not seeing the hostages back. I mean, if they give the hostages, then the pressure on the government will be lower, much lower. But what is threatening the government is that there are no hostages. So why would they give the hostages? They will give the hostages only if they are under military threat and they are about to be destroyed. And then they'll say, okay, wait, don't destroy us. Take the hostages, let us go out to the Sinai Peninsula, and let's do something else. So the administration is also endangering our people, our hostages, not only our existence. Both things are endangered by what is going on now, this kind of policy and pressure on Israel.
Do you think there is a likely chance that this rift between Israel and the U.S. could grow to the point where the U.S. would withhold, let's say, important provisions for Iron Dome?
It can be also not defending us in the UN Security Council. It can be sanctions. It can be many things. We don't know. But my assessment is, again, that if we unite, if we stand strong, if we do a decisive attack on Rafah and win, the pressure will go down. It will not go up. Now we are at the peak of pressure trying to avoid this attack. But once we do attack, then the administration will have to assess again their policies. I think there will be a lot of pressure on them to assist Israel from Congress, from Senate, from the Jewish communities. And I think it's really a very big responsibility of all Jews. It doesn't matter if they vote Republicans or Democrats, to really, really pressure the administration to write letters to congressmen and senators, to publish letters in newspapers and social media, everything that needs to be done to send a clear message. This is a red line. This is not something that any Jew can agree to.
So for all of our viewers right now, the general has issued a direct order. We have our obligations to do all that we can to get that message out. General, we're almost out of time. Let's see how many more questions we can fit in. The UN General Assembly is making a determination about the status of the Palestinian Authority. What are your thoughts on the timing of this right now?
Well, I'm not worried about the General Assembly because they have no real power. And they always pass decisions against Israel. I am worried about what might happen in the UN Security Council. I'm worried about the fact that although moving the citizens out of Rafah is a non-issue, it's not something complicated. 400,000 people already left. 100,000 people left in one day. It's not complicated. It's presented all the time also by the administration and the media like, something impossible. And when Israel will go into Rafah, many citizens will die. And it's not true. Simply not true. And I told the Prime Minister, I think Israel must improve the way it's explaining these issues. And we are trying to do the best we can to really convey messages and the understanding that Israel will do everything possible to diminish collateral damage as much as we can. And so we have a lot of hasbara issues to deal with.
Are you able to comment on the state of affairs right now between Israel and Saudi Arabia and Israel and the UAE?
Well, with the UAE, we have a peace agreement and the relations overall are good. With Saudi Arabia, I think there is a common interest to normalize relations, but Israel is saying, sure, we love to normalize relations. It's not going to be at the expense of our existence. It's not going to be at the expense of creating a Palestinian state that will endanger our existence and the capability to defend ourselves. So we are all for normalization. We're all for building a coalition. We're all for dealing together with Iran, together against Iran. But when the US is trying to push this normalization at the expense of victory, we'll leave this issue for the future, maybe for the next administration.
Brigadier General Amir Avivi, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing all of this. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. Next week, Monday, is Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day. We will be back with you 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Israel time, but with a very special program for that day. So please join us on Monday. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.